Thank you. Thank you very much, Manju, for a very warm welcome. I think I'm going to shorten my biography because it makes me sound very old. But leaving that aside, it's a real delight to be here, having been an active committee member for many years and chair for a number of years. It's kind of good to be back on home turf. So we're delighted that you're interested in this subject, which is very close to our hearts, of course. And if it's all right, I'm going to open with a very short video to set a bit of context around what the industry is doing to reduce its emissions.
How the offshore oil and gas industry is helping the UK reduce emissions. Meeting our climate goals will require big changes to how we all live and work. And our oil and gas industry has an important role to play, helping to meet as much of the UK's oil and gas needs as possible from domestic resources, producing these with fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and by using our skills, experience and infrastructure to help other sectors cut emissions. Many traditional oil and gas companies already produce energy from renewable sources, supporting a cleaner, more diverse energy mix. But they're also helping in other ways. Let's take a look at how. The oil and gas industry can help produce hydrogen, which could be an affordable and cleaner way of heating our homes and powering our transport. By 2050, the UK Committee on Climate Change predicts hydrogen will be widely produced using renewable energy sources. But in the meantime, using natural gas to produce hydrogen, combined with carbon capture and storage, can be an important stepping stone. The UK Committee on Climate Change also estimates that 175 million tonnes of CO2 will need to be removed from the atmosphere by 2050. That's even after we've achieved everything else needed to meet our climate goals. Oil and gas companies have the expertise and technology to help. They have the offshore infrastructure to capture CO2 from activities like power generation and manufacturing, and then transport and store it deep under the sea in the formations that previously held oil and gas. And they have the skills honed in the North Sea and exported globally to produce cleaner energy. It's a solution that the government says is essential to meet the UK's climate change targets. These are just some of the solutions that can help meet our climate goals. Solutions that will help deliver a fair energy transition for everyone, supporting new jobs in our communities across the country, and helping the UK build a climate-neutral society in which no one is left behind. We're ready to be part of the solution to tackle climate change. Roadmap 2035 sets out how we can do it. How the offshore oil and gas...
Sorry, that was me.
No worries. So that's just giving you a very small flavour of the breadth of things that are going on in the transition, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And there's so much spoken about the energy transition, but the area that we'll all be most interested in, of course, is what it means for people. And as part of my day job, I'm the theme lead for the People and Skills work stream of the North Sea Transition Deal, which we'll say a bit about in a moment. But just to flag up some figures here, if we look at energy security, which is on everyone's lips at the moment because of the dreadful events in Ukraine, 56% of global energy consumption, was from oil and gas in 2020. It met 73% of our needs in the UK in 2020. Now, we didn't provide all of that from our own resources. We're a net importer, particularly of gas. And what we know from other sources completely independent to us are that through to 2050, half of the energy demand will still continue to be met by oil and gas. So we've got a big role to play going forward in the oil and gas sector, but also, as we'll go on to see in a moment, about driving the decarbonisation of our economy. And in terms of jobs, if you look at the table there, you'll see the estimate for last year was more than 195,000 jobs supported by the industry. And what we mean by induced jobs there are those that result from spending in the economy from direct and indirect jobs. So that'll be things like hospitality, taxi drivers, those kind of things. Next slide, please. So I mentioned there the North Sea transition deal, which was signed a year ago between ourselves and the UK government. It's the name that we've given to what's our sector deal. You may have heard of other sector deals that have been done, particularly in wind, for example. So what we're trying to do in this is provide energy security. Again, we've touched on how important that is, and more important by the day. We want to make net zero happen. That's absolutely central to the deal. So that we want to help both the UK and Scottish governments hit their net zero targets and grow the economy, grow jobs, and protect the places where we have a footprint. So, and as we know, most of the jobs in our sector are real quality, high skilled jobs, and we want to maintain that going forward. Next slide, please. So there's kind of 5 themes, if you like, 5 work streams to the North Sea transition deal. One is about supply decarbonisation. So what do we mean by that? That's about cutting the emissions that we produce as we produce oil and gas. So how can we make our production cleaner? And that will involve electrification, which is a huge and very expensive project, but there's a massive work going on, feasibility studies for that. It won't be suitable for all because it won't be commercially viable for some older fields, but it's a critical piece of the jigsaw going forward. Flavour of the month, of course, is carbon capture and storage, and in the UK we're really well placed because of the depleted reservoirs around our coastline excuse me, to get after that. And that will be critical also for production of hydrogen, which until we can get enough green hydrogen from renewable sources, we will need to produce blue hydrogen, which will involve the production of carbon dioxide, which will need to be stored, which we can do. So those 3 work streams are absolutely key. Then we're looking at supply chain transformation. We're making sure that we have a supply chain in this country, and in our industry at the moment, we've got more than 1,000 companies, but we have enough capacity and capability to deliver the net zero agenda. So, for example, looking at manufacturing, what can we manufacture at the moment? Electrolyzers, we don't produce enough of those. That's something that's going to have to grow. And we also want to be world leaders, so look at opportunities to export technology and knowledge and expertise across the globe. And my area, or the area that we're all interested in tonight, is around people and skills. So how do we manage the transition so that people are not left behind? We don't see the experience that coal communities did in the late 80s and 90s, which most of you are probably too young to remember, but we want to make sure there's not a cliff edge and that this transition can be managed. We hear a lot of people talk about a just transition, but we're not going to have a just transition unless we can manage the transition. Irene, please. So if we look at the people and skills element of the North Sea transition deal, there are a number of strands to that, and I'll run through them quickly and happy to take questions later. I've touched on the carbon capture and storage, hydrogen electrification. We've got work going on at the moment to produce a forecast of what the number of jobs will look like in those areas between now and 2030 and 2035. We need to understand that. We need to understand the kinds of jobs. And when we put that together with work that's been done by the renewables sector, we'll have an overall picture. And we hope to have that within about a month. The second priority is minimising any barriers for the workforce for moving between oil and gas to renewables into carbon capture projects in the future, and indeed back again. So a key part of that is making sure that training and technical standards are mutually recognised and are aligned. So there's a key piece of work being done under the Energy Skills Alliance, which is chaired by APITO, with relevant bodies like the CIPD, Cogent, Renewables UK, the Global Wind Council, that is looking at how can we minimise duplication of training, cutting out cost and time, and removing barriers which the workforce are telling us and our member companies are telling us is preventing them redeploying people to other energy sectors, because we're all very much in play already, as you'll come in to see. So that we'll look at kind of what we think of as the technical hands-on crafts people. We're also looking to support the next phase of the Centre for Doctoral Training Net Zero programme. Now that's an alliance of 12 universities, which has been together. The CDT's been around for a while, but was previously focused on oil and gas. This is a programme which is fully funded by the industry, and we'll have 48 PhD students looking at net zero solutions. And that's actually chaired and run by Professor John Underhill, who's just taken up the director's post at the Energy Transition Centre at Aberdeen University. So a real supporter of oil and gas and a driver of the energy transition, and one of the many people who sees no conflict there. There's also another body looking at master's training, the Centre for Master's Training. That's 17 universities, including Aberdeen, looking at repurposing petroleum-related degrees to the energy transition. And then another leg of the stool is diversity and inclusion, and that fits absolutely hand in glove with everything else that we're doing. I don't need to make the business case to the people on the call for D&I. We all know it's the right thing to do. It's a socially responsible thing to do, but it's also absolutely critical to financing the energy transition. And why do I say that? Because access to finance now is totally aligned to environmental, social and governance ESG reporting. And key themes in the social and the governance piece is around diversity and inclusion, performance in the community, CSR, corporate governance, like executive reward. So never have we had a better opportunity as an HR profession and a better business case than now. The things, the primary focus this year in D&I is around building inclusive leadership and culture, and flexible recruitment and promotion pathways, by which we mean ensuring that our pathways are as open as possible. There's no inherent bias. We're looking in as wide a range of places as possible. The language is right. And that's looking at all aspects, protected characteristics and non-visible differences. And that plan has come from industry data from the employee survey we did last year. And we're about to embark on employer survey to get an up-to-date demographic picture. Underpinning all of this is the need to create and retain good quality jobs. We want to make sure that jobs, as far as we can make them, will have security, development opportunities, there will be employee voice, and people will understand the critical role that they're playing in the country's future. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot to show you how we're driving change and some of the key projects that are going on around the country. If we look at Northeast Scotland, for example, we've got 5 there already in wind, carbon capture and storage, exciting things happening in Shetland, and our members are involved in every one of these regions and the projects that are going on. And that's the driver really behind our move to Offshore Energies UK, because we're reflecting what our members are doing. And a number of the major contractors in particular have been playing in these areas for many years. So we're moving with the times, and that's what's behind the change. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just going back to D&I for a second, one of the things that we're going to measure, and we've really been clear with the government in this, is that we'll only set targets based on data. Is we want to improve the sentiment index. So in 2021, the employee survey was completed and analysed, and from that we developed an index of I suppose satisfaction, if you like, or sentiment from the workforce, 1,600 responses, as you see there, and that came out at 7.1 out of 10. Now, looking at that, different groups in the workforce scored various elements at a lower level. So as you can see, although the average was, or the overall score was 7.1, our scores ranged from 5.1 to 8.8. So we looked at the low scores, and that's what's driving the D&I plan. And the last slide before I hand over to Irene. So we were talking and thinking, what's the nub of this for HR professionals? From where I'm sitting, there's a key thing around retention, that we've always got the attraction piece. We've got to keep the pipeline coming in, not disputing that. But we've got oil and gas requirements out to 2050. Carbon capture, hydrogen, etc., are very early stages, and we're not seeing big capital spend at the moment. That's going to come 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line. ScotWind going to be massive, but again, we're not going to see those wind farms in the water for 8, 9, 10 years. So in the meantime, we need to keep the oil and gas industry going. We need to keep companies here. We need to keep the workforce here, because otherwise, as these other sectors take off, as they reach construction and development phases and then become operational, we won't have the skills around. They'll have moved elsewhere. A huge amount of planning to be done. We need to understand what the picture looks like across energy sectors. We need to do that for our workforce, who are really concerned at the moment. We're hearing people, particularly with all the noise, anti-oil and gas noise, concerned that the taps are going to be switched off tomorrow. The exploration will be stopped. There'll be no new licenses. So we need to provide the reassurance that there are jobs for the future while we manage the decline, which was always going to happen anyway, and move people across to the new sectors. So we need to understand the timing, the type of jobs, and remove barriers to movement. And a key role is going to be something that Irene's going to speak in more depth about, is managing expectations. People's aspirations will differ. It's going to be very different depending where you are on your career path, whether this excites you or terrifies you. So employee engagement is going to be absolutely critical. And a key audience in that is the Energy Services Agreement. And I'm going to hand over now to Irene to explain what's being done there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks very much. And welcome everyone from myself as well. So just a quick slide here, first of all, just to give you a bit of a background on what is the Energy Services Agreement. I can see from a couple of names in the meeting tonight that some of you may well be very much aware of the Energy Services Agreement, but for those that are not, it's a collective bargaining agreement. It was pulled together in 2020 and went live at the beginning of 2021. It replaced the previous Offshore Contractors Partnership Agreement. During the latter years of the OCPA, we recognised that the agreement itself, although it had been around for 25, 30 years and it had served its purpose, it was coming to a point where there were more members out with the agreement than there were as part of the agreement, and we needed to take a bold decision to do something about it. So working with the signatory companies back then, which there were 7, and the 2 trade unions, we got ourselves together and recognised something different was needed around it. So we created the new agreement, which we see as a collective voice for the supply chain companies that are signed up to the agreement. We increased the membership of the agreement from 7 to 14 companies, and we increased the trade union signatories from 2 to 3. The agreement itself provides a transparent and consistent approach towards managing employee relations, and recognises a minimum set of terms and conditions of employment. It recognises how we support towards the support we can put towards fair and sustainable working practices. We had the Scotland's Fair Work principles at the, in certainly at the forefront of our mind when we were creating it, but also just looking at it from what's the right thing to do. We wanted to make sure that the agreement was it could grow as the industry changed and the industry kind of went in different directions. And the focus that we've got for 2022 in the agreement is to look at how we can expand that scope and also the coverage of the agreement itself. I don't need to say next slide because I'm in charge of the next slide. So the leading into, as Alex says, kind of looking at this from an employee engagement point of view, I took a step back and just thought, right, okay, if someone was asking me the question, what is employee engagement? And for me, it's about being included. It's being about being part of a team. It's about having goals. It's having a purpose. It's about receiving and giving feedback. It's about having opportunities. It's about having the opportunities for development, getting recognition, providing recognition in that as well. It's having a fulfillment, and it's having that voice, and it's being that voice being heard as well. We often hear lots about people saying, oh, we're into employee engagement, we've got a survey, we measure our engagement levels on an annual basis, etc. But then you might hear them also saying, but we don't do anything about it once we've collated that score. Yeah, we've got good employee engagement, we've got a weekly or monthly newsletter that goes out, but are they actually hearing anything back from employees at the same time? And it's also in my head not about talking at employees. It's more, absolutely more so about talking with employees and finding out, about what their real thoughts and what's really, bothering them from that aspect. These areas that I've got there, that it's not about, are enablers, and are very effective when they're used in the correctly and for the right reasons. So from the Energy Services Agreement point of view, what's the link between it and employee engagement? So utilising all of these aspects of what I say, from my point of view, what employee engagement is, we made sure that in the creation of the agreement that we asked the employers, we asked the trade unions who were representing their members, we asked the workforce through the workforce reps, what needed to be different. So we had an agreement in place previously that had been there, as I said, for 25, 30 years. It fulfilled a role, it fulfilled a task that it was there for, but we were also hearing that it needed to be modernised, it needed to be updated, it needed to be relevant to the industry. So we listened to what mattered most. We tried to find the right balance, and it was difficult at times, but we got there and found the solution that met everybody's needs. We built an agreement that can grow with the needs of the industry. We continue to listen and we continue to ask. We have quarterly workforce engagement sessions where the signatory companies, their workforce, the trade unions, and that we all come together and we share information, but we also ask the workforce, you know, what is mattering to them at that time, what's concerning them, what's bothering them. We also ask for their help and advice in things that we're perhaps putting forward, and I'll share an example with you just in 1 or 2 slides coming. We ask their opinion on certain topics. We want them to tell us how to tackle certain subjects. One of the questions we'd asked is that, you know, we feel that there are barriers to communication with the offshore workforce, and despite many different sort of actions that the employers have taken, the communications are not getting through. You know, there may be, you know, like communicating very effectively, but the message is not landing. We ask them what they want to hear more about, what they want to hear less about, and we recognise that there's still a whole load still to be done. But by creating the agreement that we've got, fundamentally the collective bargaining agreement, you know, it sets the minimum terms and conditions of employment, but we're using it as a tool to really engage the workforce across the 14 member companies, signatory companies, to the agreement itself. So we'll continue to ask, we'll continue to listen, and hopefully we'll continue to react as well. My next slide here talks around why does engagement matter. And when you go and do your research around this, you'll see, you know, the figures quoted there by Gallup, that highly engaged employees are 21% more productive. Engaged employees generate 2.5 times more revenue for their organisations. So with figures like that, it matters. And it's one area where I feel that, you know, HR can certainly contribute to the bottom line of their organisations, can see that they can, you know, really impact change and kind of growth for the organisation as well. But this is not just the job of HR. You know, as I'm sure a lot of you within the HR profession, and that, you know, as soon as employee engagement is spoken about, the turn round to find the nearest HR professional and say, you know, what are you going to do about it? With figures like this, it is the, you know, it's a shared challenge with leadership, with management. In fact, the whole organisation should be bought into what we can do to help improve employee engagement across it. So as we increase the stats, how do we ensure that we do have engaged employees? So I myself have always kind of referred back to the diagram that I've got there, looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But the boxes to the side are, you know, my take on it, and, you know, how employee engagement kind of fits into this as well. We may all be complex characters, and there are some very underlying common traits within us all. And I think using this, you know, we can link it back into how we keep it simple, how we keep it straightforward, and how we can have effective results, and that from it. So, you know, one of the things to look at is, you know, how are you doing in each of these areas within your own organisations or organisations that you're supporting? So how does it look there? Are you addressing, you know, like some of the simple issues and some of the simple problems? Do your company's results tell stories without you actually needing to do an engagement survey? And, you know, like, how does this all impact, you know, within your own organisation, and what are the barriers to effective engagement within your organisation itself? A couple of examples that I can share from past experiences. So in a previous organisation, when I first started in my career within HR, we were asked to run an employee engagement survey. We achieved better than average results, which everybody was, you know, congratulating each other on. There was lots of relief, but there was also some surprise with it. When we analysed the results further, it was very clear that we were growing people to leave our organisation. And the turnover figures supported this as well. We were falling down, however, in the basics. We didn't have clear expectations set. We didn't share information well. So employees weren't being provided with the opportunities to see how their contribution delivered towards the overall organisation's results. But we were excellent, as I said, at developing with lots of internal promotions, and we were, great at sponsoring further education, etc. But having the results in front of us and being able to break it down into the different areas, it allowed us to kind of take a step back and look at the focus and how that could then have an impact in our company's results overall. And actually, when you look at it and break it down like this, it was really simple in our case back then. We needed to ensure that everybody knew what was expected of them. We needed to look at the training, the tools and equipment that they had, and were individuals trained to utilise the equipment and that effectively. And we needed to create a way of sharing the company performance stats on a sort of weekly basis. And we did this really, really simply. We created a newsletter. So as I said back in the previous slide, it's not about a newsletter, but they are enablers to help, with improving employee engagement results. We created a newsletter that shared the production figures, it shared the waste figures, it shared the sales targets, and we did all of this by printing the newsletter on the back of the canteen menu that was then distributed for that week. It meant that every single employee who was looking to find out what was for lunch that day in the canteen picked up that newsletter, and hopefully over time they flipped the canteen menu over and they were able to read and find out more. Not only did our survey results improve the next year, but we've seen an improvement in the turnover figure. We've seen an improvement in safety results. We've seen increased productivity levels. We've seen employees starting to put forward more suggestions and ideas for their own workplace, their own working environments. They put forward ideas around how they could carry out their own work, their own tasks differently, and much more effectively, and that as well. And that included changing some things around the production line. Another example that I've got was something that we heard recently in the Energy Services Agreement Employee Engagement Forum. I mentioned there that we talked, we asked the workforce to tell us, how could we break down some of the barriers there were to communication and therefore engagement. And one guy put his hand up and says, you need to put yourself into our shoes. You need to think about what turns our minds on and what turns them off. One thing, and this was the example that you shared, one thing that turns my mind off, and this was in November that we were talking, is that during the weeks leading up to Christmas, the food choice offshore is limited. It can be rehashed, it's just uninspiring. And because the camp boss is saving his budget to do the best he can for Christmas Day. So when I see an email coming through from my employer, I press delete. They're not interested in me, so I'm not interested. And that, hearing that firsthand from the individual who was willing to, to raise his hand and speak about it, just allowed me to see that, it really is that simple things. And when you start to think about the barriers to employee engagement within your own organisations, etc., sometimes it is just starting. The most effective is by starting and looking at the simple stuff first. So where do you focus your attention? So, again, back to my source of Gallup, looking at engaged employees. So from their stats, we've got 36% on average globally employees who are engaged. They understand it and they do, they get it. They're in a job that they love. They can see the difference that they can make. They recognise their contribution. They hear it from others, including their peers and management. They feel that they belong to the organisation. In fact, they really care about their peers. They care about the organisation itself, their colleagues, and they understand the organisation, company values. They live them without even thinking about it. They feel they're their voice is being heard, their opinions matter, etc. But when looking at how you improve your employee engagement scores, we need to make sure we don't fall into the trap of thinking that this group are okay and that you don't need to pay any attention to these guys. You need to maintain that 36% and make sure that you're growing it. So you need to find out from this group what's working for them and then do more of it. The next category I'm looking at there is the disengaged employees. So what do they look like? So this group were engaged at one point, but something happened. They lost their trust, they feel let down, they feel they're not being recognised for the work that they do. No one listens, so it's kind of, why do I bother? But these guys have the potential to be engaged again. So if just somebody would listen to them and understand what it is that was turning them off. This is probably the highest percentage of kind of in the breakdown, but probably the area where most of your time and attention is going to be directed, and a little bit more complex in that as well, because you need to find out what it was that turned these individuals off, that changed their views, changed their opinions. You need to spend time getting to know the root cause of the problems. You need to look at what is it that needs to be solved? Is it company culture? Is it something, to do with the company values? Are they not seeing it, being played out within the organisation? It's an area where you need to review, you need to understand, and then look at how you address it. It's maybe difficult to hear, but even more so to tackle. But to change that 51%, this is where you need to kind of concentrate your time and attention. And then the last segment there, the unengaged employee. So, these are individuals who don't necessarily care about their job or the organisation. They're kind of there for the money, and nothing else really matters to them. Maybe not necessarily, particularly like their job. There's no set of job satisfaction or fulfillment for them. A serious issue, but maybe there's perhaps a simpler solution to this group. And it maybe is just starting with recognition. It's looking at, are they being rewarded fairly? Looking at your own company values. Can the workplace buy into the values and that they're there? And what do they mean to the workforce? Setting up discussion groups and start acting and finding out what they really care about. So overall, you need to look at where best you can add value and where you can get your best return for investment and the time and effort that you put in and that of your organisation. You're looking to keep those who are engaged, keep them engaged, add to the population by addressing the issues that are fundamentally driving the disengagement and the unengaged population. So before I finish, I just wanted to kind of ask you to reflect yourselves on what is impacting employee engagement within your own organisation. And if I go back to the Maslow's triangle, but kind of pull out more from the kind of the from my point of view, like the different in that areas, is just to ask yourself, do your employees, do they understand what's expected of them in their role? Are they able to achieve those expectations? Do they feel that they have the right equipment, the skills and the technology to fulfill the roles? Are their basic needs being met? Do they feel that they've got a purpose? Do they feel that secure? Do they feel that they've got the opportunity to grow and develop further within the organisation? Do they feel that they're being fairly rewarded? Is everyone treated fairly? Is there parity, equal parity across the organisation? Do they feel that someone cares for them as a person? Is it a colleague? Is it a line manager? So are they being cared for? Do they feel respected? Does their opinion count? Has someone listened to them, their concerns or their suggestions? Do they feel that they belong to the organisation? Do they understand the values, etc.? And do they enjoy the work that they do? Are they getting a sense of fulfilment and achievement? And is there an opportunity for them to develop? Is there career progression there? Is there an opportunity for them to basically learn and grow? So on the slide there, just some questions in that, I guess, for you to think about when you're thinking about employee engagement within your own areas. So moving on to our last question, this is your opportunity now to, I guess, ask Alex or myself any questions that you might have.
Thank you both. That was a very insightful presentation. Really appreciate your time. Any questions? Because I couldn't find anything in the chat box. And as we said in the beginning, this is a time for any discussions, any questions. Please feel free to add. Thank you.
I think we've stunned everybody. or they're all hungry and want their dinner.
Again, please use the opportunity to ask any questions, how this is going to impact the HR world, which already discussed, but any questions. And there's a question in the chat box from Hazel. Employee engagement survey can be expensive run. Is this a common tool for this is there a common tool for this provided by OEUK?
There's not necessarily a common tool, but there's lots that you can gain out there without having to go through a specific employee engagement setup survey. You could do it yourself through, SurveyMonkey. It's basing your questions for me around those different areas. I think, Hazel. Good to see you again as well.
Hi, yeah, thanks. That's what I thought, Irene, so thanks for that.
There's another question from Emma. Are there any recommendation as to how to keep up to date with the energy transition? Will OEUK be doing regular updates?
I think it's fair to say the answer to that will be yes, and you'll probably be sick hearing of them. But if I don't know who you work for, Emma, but if it's a member company, then
Would.
Oh, thank you. You might have guessed we're sitting next to each other here in the office. Yes, you'll be able to. There's a part of the OEUK website where there's energy transition or NS&I material, and you can access all of that. We're also very happy to get any of the team to come along to your organisations, whether it's Irene or I or Irene and I, or indeed if you want people to talk about the supply chain side or the more technical areas of electrification, carbon capture, etc. I mean, everybody in the team is connected with our members. We've got groups in all of those areas, but yep, we're here to help in whatever way we can.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? We still have got some time.
Hi, it's Shona here. Just with regard to the 2030 job requirement planning, will that be announced in the same way? I just have children that may be coming of age at that time, and so it might be quite of interest.
So when you say announced in the same way, do you mean on the website and things? No,
Yes.
we will be.
Yes.
No, we will be making announcements about those things because they're really important. But they will be. That information will be available to members. It's absolutely critical in terms of the people and skills piece. And to be quite frank, we're amongst friends here. It's critical politically because if some of the real threats that existential threats or challenges are from the chance that a government may do what some other governments have done and put an end to exploration or whatever. So it's really important that we can make our politicians aware. And we had Richard Lockhead in today, actually, and a number of our board in there speaking about all the great stuff that's going on, but the real focus for them is jobs and what does it mean for communities. So we want to make sure that, you know, there are a number of communities in the country where we have a significant footprint, this being one of the biggest. We need to make sure that you know, we take the community with us. So yes, we will be sharing that information.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Manju again. I have a question, if that's okay. And I fully appreciate that none of us would have like a clear picture, but I'm just keen to understand OEUK's view in relation to the Russian and Ukraine issue, considering the increase in the oil and gas and oil price and the sanctions being implemented. So in OEUK's view, how is the future looking like? What is the future will be? Or is it like too early to ask that question because it's all like recent developments?
Yeah, so there's a lot in that question. And as an apolitical organisation, no, clearly the first thing we want to stress is huge concern and sadness about what's happening. We are getting people who are saying, you know, you're doing all right. Oil's $129 or whatever it is. Gas is at X price. Leaving aside all the technicalities of when people actually buy their oil and gas, it doesn't mean that people are selling it for that. That's a different situation. But there's nobody happy about commodity prices increasing in this way. What we are doing is preparing to feed into the government's resilience discussions. So we're in constant dialogue to see what can we do to ensure security of supply, because that is the critical thing at the moment. Another question we got today was from the media was, are these really high prices going to feed into new jobs? I'm not sure why people might think that, because the prices are coming simply from the awful events that are unfolding and supply and demand. This is an artificial situation, and we all hope that it will be resolved soon. And it's certainly not going to lead to a jobs bonanza. For one thing, you know, if we wanted to bring new fields on stream, many of you on the call will know how long that lead time is. You'll know how long it takes to get through the regulators and all of those things. That's not going to happen. Our producers are already producing at capacity. There isn't an extra kind of turbo switch that will get extra oil and gas out of the ground. So what will happen in the long term, none of us can say. We're all hoping for getting back to some semblance of normality. So I suppose that's our view. Like everyone else, we're saddened and horrified, but we recognise the important role that we have to play in keeping the lights on, and indeed opening up the conversation not just about security of supply for the UK, but for Europe.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that answered your question, but that's the best I can do.
Absolutely. It's just the view, and you know, it's just like a saddened situation to the entire world. But thank you for sharing that perspective. Appreciate it. Any other question? Any final two questions? I'm just conscious about the time as well, but I just wanted to give a last chance to see if there is anything else to be discussed. Anybody? Okay, not looking like, but I really hope this was a great presentation and a great event to all of you in this call. All of us work in the HR industry, and this is the time, you know, like that provided an opportunity to understand the transition, how it impacts the engagement, and it was a great insight to each and every one of us. thank you, both of you, and it was interesting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Thank
opportunity.
you.
And we'd love feedback. If you've got any thoughts or comments, please do get in touch with us.
And there is a lot of thank you messages in the chat box telling this was an interesting event. That's great. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback as well.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.